Hello, I'm here with Richard Barbrook. He's working with Games for the Many as the co-founder. Richard, can you tell me a little bit about what your role is and why it's so important? Can games change the world?
I'm Richard Barbrook. I'm Digital Democracy and Game Strategist for the Labour Leadership Office, and I'm Senior Lecturer in Politics at the University of Westminster.
So why is Games for the Many so important? James talks about games changing the world, and do you think that can happen?
Well, can any culture change the world? I suppose it can. I mean, I think there's two ways of looking at this. One is games as a way of communicating Labour's message in a different way. So something like Corbyn Run was very successful because it answered really basic questions. How are you going to pay for your manifesto? We're going to chase Tories and shake them down for their cash. They've been giving money to the rich and imposing cuts on the rest of us. So, and the game says this in a humorous way. But it was a symbol of actually. When I was at party conference, a lot of people had it on their phone, and a lot of people said it did show how the Labour Party had changed, that it was willing to engage with games culture. And if you think about it, I mean, it's everywhere. It's one of the biggest cultural industries in this country, but it's not seen as somehow legitimate. Whereas we say, no, it's great. People like playing games. Let's engage and make political games. So there's that side of it, which is just like a good way of getting Labour's message out there, which is has a serious point to it, but it's in a humorous and playful way. The other thing is using games to think about the future. And that's the other thing I'm involved with, is setting up these war games, as John McDonnell likes calling them, with the Treasury team. So what do we do in our first 100 days in office? And you get a group of people who are actually going to be running the Treasury, and you give them a 3-hour intensive scenario. It's basically scenario based. They go there and you create problems for them and stress them out. And so they get a sort of taste of the sort of pressures they're going to be on in about a year or so's time when we come to power. And then also doing mega games with Labour activists, so people who won't go into government, but they need to start thinking now about what happens when there's a Labour government which they brought to power, and it's obviously going to have problems, And so we're going to play based on this novel and TV series from the 1980s called A Very British Coup, to disguise what we're talking about the future by disguising it as the past. But that's, again, it's a way of getting people to think about those problems. And often games are a way, because it's an immersive experience, there's a difference between, you can read about things, you can discuss things, but if you play a serious game, you can often understand things a lot better because you're confronted with choices.
I think one of the most interesting things I've found from just being here and talking to some of the contestants is the role of power in games. Participants, yeah.
We're into cooperation.
Is the role of power in games, and also how that links to power in politics? So,
well, it's what John said in the introduction. It's about harnessing people's creativity and not seeing it as just taking from people and then not giving anything back. It's actually empowering people to actually participate. So you don't just play the game; you're actually learning how to be political. And it's not just being a government for the many, it's being government by the many, and that's the key thing, it seems to me. Because there's no way a few hundred Labour MPs or a few thousand advisors are by themselves going to be able. I mean, they can prove things for people, but if you want a fundamental transformation of Britain to being a better country, you're going to need to mobilise millions of people behind it, and games is a way in for getting people to do that. And so it's not just creating their own games, but hopefully the games create a way that their players can think about how to do it. So for instance, I was just been to Madrid for a conference, and I met a group of Portuguese people, and they've invented a game about participatory budgeting. Now we would like to introduce this at a local and hopefully even at a national level, but people have got to understand what participatory budgeting is. So they could read a long boring article about it, or they could read a short journalistic piece, but if they actually get to play a little game of it, they might understand it a lot better, especially as it's about trading off one thing against another, making priorities. And so I think that's another good example where it's not games help change the world. I think Josie's being a little optimistic there, but they can help people change the world.
Yeah, and people are the only thing that can change the world. Grassroots movements like that.
But it has to be coupled with state power. You see, I think this is the key thing about the Labour left, is that we kept banging on about this. Is that you know, grassroots stuff is great and cooperatives and all the rest of it. It's got to be coupled with a political project. You know, which is serious about winning an election and running the state.
As long as those politicians and those people in power are accountable to the people.
Exactly,
and that's exactly why people voted Brexit. They're fed up of that top-down politics. So,
well, you know, people voted Brexit for all sorts of reasons. Other people voted Brexit because they want to go back to the 1950s, as my mother pointed out, when they were all 20.
But young people vote for Brexit as well.
Very few, though, as a percentage. It was a very. I mean, there was a sort of. I had friends who were like Lexiters, who were sort of.
I've heard a lot about that. Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's like the Tony Benn sort of, you know, nostalgia club. And then I met this anarchist who said, I voted Brexit to fuck up the system. And I thought, you're going to be the only person happy with the results.
Yeah, you probably succeed. Yeah.
Yeah, you have succeeded. You did fuck up the system. I mean, I'm definitely a Remainer. I voted. Actually, my first ever vote was the 1975 referendum
to join the EU.
No, we were already in, to stay in. The first, I actually voted in the first referendum.
Right, okay.
I voted for a federal European Republic and I'm still waiting.
Right, okay. But it's not perfect, is it? But how do we change that?
No way, no. EU is dreadful, but Brexit is much worse.
Yeah.
I think that was the problem, that was a bit too complicated for the BBC, with the Labour leadership's messages. We did like the EU, but we liked Brexit even less.
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast yesterday actually. It said like the approaches from the left and the right now is just about mitigating the worst manifestations of Brexit. It's no longer about getting anything positive out of it. Would you agree with that?
Will it ever happen? I mean, that's the interesting thing. I'm still very sceptical it's ever going to happen in any meaningful sense. Beano, you know this phrase, Beano?
No.
Brexit in name only.
Oh, okay. So you don't think it's actually going to come to pass?
In a meaningful sense.
Right, okay.
Well, they could do. They could drive the whole economy off a cliff. It seems funny when the managing committee of the bourgeoisie are behaving like this. I mean, if there were a bunch of the SWP, I could sort of understand it. But this is supposed to be, you know, these are supposed to be the people from the elite who went to all the posh universities and expensive private schools, and they're the people doing it.
Yeah.
Which just seems bizarre in some sort of crazy ideological fantasy.
Well, I think it's opportunistic, isn't it? I mean,
I know they believe it. I think this is the thing you need. Yeah, maybe in Boris's case, but they believe it. You know, the thing is with politicians, it's always dangerous to think that politicians don't believe what they say. From my experience, no one believed Thatcher that she meant what she said, and then she went ahead and did it.
And we're still feeling the consequences.
Because people didn't take her seriously. You know, or Blair, they didn't believe that Blair really was, you know, into all this third way. But he was, and he loved America, and he'd said it openly. And so we ended up following them into the Iraq debacle. So you need to think that they do believe what they say.
So if a Labour government wants to come into power, would they be looking for less of a special relationship with America?
I think it's sort of over that thing, that sort of fantasy that we were Robin to their Batman.
Well, like you said, they dragged us into the Iraq War. Theresa May was over
but it's
there
interesting.
but
It's interesting. Yeah, we're doing this a very British coup mega game, and in this 1980s novel, which is really based around Chile. So it's a novel and a TV series about a hard left Labour Prime Minister in the 1980s, and it's obviously based on Allende in Chile. So there's like the Americans are the main enemy. But you think now in 2017, okay, they'd probably be a bit upset if there's a Corbyn government. But on the other hand, you think actually our real relationships now with the French and the Germans, I mean, they're actually, you know, it's our neighbour. So it's interesting, the EU hardly appears in this novel. It's like a really peripheral thing. They just follow the Americans.
Yeah.
Whereas the whole balance of power has changed. I say, you know, it's really important that Jeremy just went to Portugal to talk to the people there, and he's been to Brussels to talk to the Second International Socialism, because that's really who we're going to have to work with at some point. So it comes back, well, whatever our final relationship with the EU is, a lot of it's going to be what is our relationship with the other left-wing parties in Europe. Because I think there are a lot of problems with the EU, which someone should do a game about it.
The way they treated Greece is
appalling. Yeah, but but somebody could do it'd be interesting to do a game about how would you make the EU function for people, and not just for the banker.
It would be a very complicated game.
It would be, yeah, but it'd be an interesting one. I think it's. I mean, that's the problem with Brexit. It sort of obscured actually the real problems, which is how do you make, because it's make this very lot 400 million people. How do they govern themselves? I mean, that's really difficult when they all speak different languages. They have very different national histories. But the alternative in Europe has been usually slaughtering each other by the hundreds of thousands. See, it's interesting, my mother, because she's in her early 80s, and she's very pro-EU because she remembers her father being sent off to the Second World War. And so, she says she blames all the 70-somethings who didn't experience the Second World War and watched too many war movies of Britain standing alone. She said rather than the real thing.
And that is what is quoted by many of the pro-EU commentariat. It's kind of the fact that how many wars have started when we've been in the EU? 0. How many before? Well,
it is true. If you go to, I remember being going across the border, the German-French border at night. We didn't know we'd crossed it until we actually got to the Autobahn, and it's in German. And you just think how many millions of people have died for this fucking stupid border between Alsace, Lorraine, and Germany, going back and forth. And yet it's disappeared. They've got the same currency. There's no apart from, they said, the change in the language. And then you compare it to, say, Yugoslavia, where I remember, because I'm old enough to remember when it was Yugoslavia, and I actually been twice to Slovenia and didn't realise I'd been also to Croatia because we'd just driven somewhere, and because it was nearby and fun, it was a nice seaside town, so we just went there. And it's only later, when I went back after the thing, and there's this bloody border there, and all this stupid customs, and then they started hassling us because we had an overhead projector which we then had to leave with the Slovene customs because it was dangerous to take it in to Croatia in case we started causing subversion. It's just like lunacy. I mean, yeah.
And finally, I just want to ask you about your interview on the BBC Politics this morning, Sunday Politics. So you're on with the Daily Mail columnist. What was her name?
Oakenshotter.
Yeah. And they were asking you about Games for the Many.
Well, they did very good. I thought the little piece they did on it was really good, and it was okay. But they were doing the classic gotcha. So they go right to the end, and they put them on, and they do some long, complicated spiel nonsense, and give you 2 seconds to reply. So I just said, "You're being a Tory troll," and that just completely flummoxed them because they're just not used to people calling them out, basically.
Yeah.
I'm an old punk, so I don't take shit for no one, mate.
Yeah. 2 fingers up to the Tories.
And then she claimed she wasn't a member of the Tory party. That was the funniest thing. Well, she doesn't need to be, probably.
No.
She was born into it. She inherited it.
Yeah. She's sort of espousing their agenda anyway, isn't she?
So you get like you get your 15 minutes of Twitter controversy.
What has that been like, the online presence, the online reaction?
You get the usual things, the usual insults. I just when they accuse me of being a Trotskyist, I get really annoyed. I am not and never have been a member of a totalitarian organisation.
But that's the default kind of argument against
that's what she
socialism,
said.
isn't it?
Oh yeah, she said, you're old-fashioned and all this sort of nonsense. And it's just like, it's just so tedious. I mean, you could have the serious discussion. Again, it's a bit like the Brexit thing. It closes down any serious discussion, and that's what's annoying about it. Because you could have a serious discussion about what economic policy should be, but they're not interested. It's just all Yahoo sucks.
But what was interesting for me is that she was saying that Labour's economic policies are outdated. There's this famous thing of wanting to call it going back to the 1980s, but the austerity platform.
1970s, when we were the happiest. Actually, people were happiest here. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the 1970s, and there were lots of shit things about it, like racism and homophobia and trying to get a decent cup of coffee. But on the other hand, it was much more egalitarian, and actually it shows that people were happier. If you have very egalitarian stuff, people are happier. Even the rich are happier. So it shows that you should pay more taxes, even the rich, because you'll be happier.
But I suppose anyone that's trying to defend the failed Tory austerity platform, I don't really have much time for.
Or with Venezuela, that's my other favourite. Or your China. They can't say China because it's too successful. Or everything bad about China is socialism, everything good about China is capitalism.
So final thoughts about Games for Money. How has this event been this weekend?
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. I mean, it's a really good start. I mean, you know, as I was saying in that interview, I've been, you know, where, you know, at the beginning of my punk and rave and all that, we always start with a small group of people and you sort of build outwards. So you get, they had a real buzz. I mean, it's a real buzz, and there are a lot of people around the country who are already making games, and it's just like bringing them all together and getting them to communicate and become friends with each other.
And there's so much talent in the room just for
It's really impressive actually. I was really impressed.
Thanks for your time, Richard. Keep fighting those Tory trolls.
I will.